Thank you. This is a different experience for all of us today, and the editing will be maybe no on that. No, I'm kidding on that. Let me say there are those sitting in this room, I know it, that are right now are extremely uneasy because everything behind me is not centered. There are people in this room, reason I know because I've been confronted about it, that when the chalkboard or the marker board is behind me, which it always is, that it needs to be centered. I mean, this much, the same thing on each end. Well, today I put this drawing up here. I just sort of looked in the vicinity of the center, and it's not in the center, so you got to pick out, do you want this in the center or you want the chalkboard in the center? So that's where it is. I mean, it wasn't done on purpose, but it happened. So I just tell you, so if you can get past that, it will be, you'll maybe enjoy things a little bit better, okay? Probably almost every lesson that I think that I teach, I have an introduction that's designed to reach out and get each of us and sort of pull us and say, hey, let go of that out there. Let's talk, let's think, let's work right here today on this focal passage and all that kind of thing. Well, I don't have one today because the more I read, I decided that background material was very, very important to the understanding of this, and that's a part of that up there. And by the way, I drew that, so if y'all won't be concerned about it, I did that. What I want to do, I'm going to give you information overload, tell you right now. But let me give you some background to help us understand the book of Luke. And I'm just going to read stuff off here. We'll not stop and talk about them. Would you believe that the Gospel of Luke, the author is never identified? That's a little interesting, isn't it? Never identified. But since the 2nd century, nobody has ever suggested that anybody other than Luke himself wrote this. Because the same author, you remember, writes the book of Acts, as wrote this one right here. So, well, the first one right here, the one we're studying in, Luke focuses on the work of Jesus. And in the book of Acts, he focuses on the work of the church. Two different kinds of things like that. Luke, what we know about him, he was a physician. He was a very close friend and a supporter of Paul. Matter of fact, went with Paul on some of his journeys. An interesting thing, and just grab hold of this for just a moment. Don't spend a lot of time here. Luke was not a Jew. Well, now you stop and think about the Bible. You stop and think about how this thing is developed and what's in the Bible. But Luke's not a Jew. He wasn't even an apostle. When I say apostle, that's the definition of apostle is those who saw Jesus soon after his resurrection. Or Paul was the other one, by the way. So there basically are 11 apostles per se in the original meaning. Luke was not one of those people. You look at the other people who have written in the New Testament, they were. Another interesting thing, Luke contributed more to the New Testament than Paul did. Yeah. All right. And I say it, and let me define it in this term. He contributed more in the way of quantity. There are more verses. You don't measure the length of verses, but there are more verses of what Luke wrote in two books than Paul did in all of his. That's not a competition. You understand that. It's just a piece of information to help us maybe have a little bit of better understanding of the book of Luke. In his book, let me tell you what, he has some basic themes in there. One of them, he asks the question, doesn't write it out this way, but says, how did an originally Jewish movement become the basis for salvation for everybody, which means Gentiles? How do you manage that kind of thing? Something that started out so restricted and so limited in that regard, yet it ended up being like this. Another thing, he asks the question and deals with it. Do Gentiles really belong in this movement? All this is written about. Of course, y'all need to say, you better say yes, because we're in that group. But Luke deals with that. Another one, he says, if Jesus was originally the Messiah for Israel. Folks, the Old Testament is a very, very focused thing on the Jews and God's calling to them and how his plan for them. It says, why, if that's the case, it's a Jewish movement, why was there so much opposition to Jesus as the Messiah? To the point that they crucified him. He says, logically what? That doesn't make sense. That's his thinking. Another one, how could a crucified Messiah, stop and think for just a moment, culturally, what does crucifixion mean? Somebody that's sorry, no good, so-and-so, that's created crimes and da-da-da-da-da-da. All right, but think of that in mind of his question. He says, how does a crucified Messiah become the basis of hope for all humanity? They were so mad at him, going to get rid of him, that they crucified him, the question they asked. And then then he deals with the issue of what does God call us to do as a result of all the things that he finds in his book. All right, 4 basic reasons for Luke writing the book. And we find these in first 4 verses as a little introduction to the book. One, he says he wanted to provide, listen to his words here, an orderly, logical, systematic account of God's plan for Jesus as the Savior for the world. That's what he set out to do. But he set out from the background of a Gentile, thinking he's a believer, but he doesn't have all the background that the Jews had in that regard. He also wanted to show the scope of God's love through Jesus. Got the scope, how wide is that issue there? Then an interesting thing for me was that he traced Jesus back to Adam, not to Abraham. He went on back there. Most of the Jewish writers start and they go and take him back to Abraham because of God leading with Abraham one-on-one and all that. He goes all the way back to Adam. Very interesting observation there. Now, then the thing he does is he sets out to show that Jesus is the fulfillment of God's plan for Israel also. So he covers lots of stuff. Really, really does. So another this is a tidbit. 49% of Luke's gospel is not found anywhere else in the other 3 gospels. Got it? 49% of what Luke says is not included in Matthew, Mark, and John. Interesting, but it's okay. So, based upon these things, this tidbits, I would say I've come to believe that Luke is a unique gospel in that regard. But we don't want to throw it by any means. We want to throw it out. Now, one other tidbit of information that's I want to get to it, and that is Luke writes in today's lesson, writes about the fact that Zechariah was a priest and was serving in the temple. And when you get to digging into this a little bit, they found out that there were approximately 18,000 priests in Israel. Now, folks, think for just a moment and think about the I'm going to call it how small the group of the people of Israel were as far as the world is concerned, but there were 18,000 of them who qualified as priests. Now, does that mean they had a role different from everybody else? But these priests, because there were so many, they were divided into 24 groups. There's a structure here, folks. 24 groups that had about 750 priests in each group. And so what happened in all this is they took turns, the groups took turns about going to the temple and working and serving and minister through the temple. So what happened, and by the way, they only worked two weeks a year as a priest. They weren't back to back. It was 1 week here and 1 week down there. So what happened, the rest of the time you go home. And whatever they do when they went home, I don't know. But you see, just to give you a feel for that, because we're going to deal with one of those today. Now, the other thing, when they came back, and we're talking about the temple in Jerusalem. When they came to serve, they helped get the day. They served when people came to worship at the temple. By the way, worship at the temple in the morning began at 9 o'clock, and it went until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There was formality. People could come and make their sacrifices and all of that kind, whatever it is that they chose to do. 9 to 3. So the priests were involved during all of that period of time. Basically what they did was a family would come. They would bring the animal, whatever it was that they were going to offer as a sacrifice. They would give that, and they would go through a process at the temple. We'll touch it very, very briefly in just a moment. And Then, prior to the offering of the sacrifice, there was the thing called incense. That was, and during the time of the day when people were offering sacrifices, incense, there was a place, and we'll touch this right here. There was a place where incense was, if you will, constantly burned, and I'm talking about fire was used because it triggered the wonderful flavor and all that, smell and all that went up to God, and I felt like that this was a way of approaching God with this situation. So, now, back to the priest thing, it's very possible, folks, think about this. It's very possible that a priest could live his entire life and never be chosen to go inside this right here. All of his work was outside because it's by the draw. And by the way, you only served one time. If you served once, you didn't get to put your name in the hat anymore. That's how they did that kind of thing. So, during the time that there are all these offerings are taken during the day, and also at the morning and then the evening, priests would go into the holy of the holy place and to offer incense to somebody's offering that was taking place right outside. Okay, with that in mind, let me just do something. You're going to have to trust me that this is okay. This is basically a floor plan of the temple. This would have been Solomon's temple right now it's a Temple Mount, just as bare except for the Muslim mosque that's out in the middle of it, not kind of thing. But this is that temple. Let me walk through it, if you will, right here. Okay, down here is the entrance. I only had one. All right, everybody came in this door right down here. Okay. And I'm going to show you something. Right here and right here. You remember Jesus talking about the widow who put in her 2 mites? You remember that? There's where she put them, right there. Or right there. It was a little that big and had a metal top on top of it. So we talked about you can throw your coins in. He says greater. You get back to what he said. He's talking about them. But anyway, this is where they came in. They put their offerings right here. This is called the court of the women. Pardon me, folks, this is the world, the way it was. Women could go no further toward the temple than this right here. Here this all on ground level. Right here, too, what they call the women's balcony. They did give them grace enough that they provided a ladder. They could climb the ladder and look over here and look toward this over here. All right, but that's as far as they went. I can't explain anything any more beyond that. Okay, when we get past that, then we're moving into the area more so in the area of the temple. All right, here we are, grounds right here before we move into the temple. Right over here is the slaughter area. All right, they took a live animal, the best that they had. They'd take it up there to offer it as an offering, a sacrifice for the family. Here's where they killed them. Right there. They had to take care of that. So this was, and then you got a priest that are working over here, by the way, but helping in this area. Now, from the slaughter area, they're going to do a burnt sacrifice. They come right over here. Here's a place right here on this side where they literally offered burnt sacrifices. Those are stairs, and I know y'all can't figure them out, but they go up on top of it right here. Now, okay, also right here is a laver or a big bowl of water where they wash their hands because of what they were doing right here. So somebody was going to participate, a family is going to participate offering an offering. They could come and they stood right here while the priest did all this kind of thing right here. Did all that. It's okay. All right, now, once the offering was made, then there was an incense that was given to that offering, that incense would lift the prayer and the concerns of people to God. So the chief priest of the day, that's who our guy by the name of Zacharias was. All right, the chief priest, he drew the lot and got it for the day. That means he gets to go into what is called the holy place. That's this right here. The holy place. Nobody, people like you and I didn't get to go. Only priests went in there. They went in here, and there are only three things in there. Bev, let me have that. I tried to find something better. This is the best I could do. Right here was the giant menorah, or the 7-place candlestick. Okay, it was a very unique thing. Go back to the Old Testament and find it. But it's that style, folks. That's it, right there. Giant one. I don't know. I looked and I never could find the size of it. I mean, the length of it. But it stood right here, and candles burned on it all the time. And then the priests who went in there, their job to keep the candles lighted that were on there. That's one of the things they did. Right over here is called the table of showbread. All right, this goes back to David when he was on the run from Saul, and bread that's offered in there. And I won't. You can look that up if you want to look it up. Then right here we got three things: this, and right here is what's called the altar of incense. And this is where the priest, when a family offered a sacrifice out here, he would take incense in and put them on the altar of incense right there and make sure they were burning, so the sweet smelling sacrifice was working its way up toward God. So they have those three things. This is where Zechariah went in our passage today. He was the priest that did this right here. He's the only one in the room at all right here. Now, just a little beyond that, right here is what we'll call the Holy of Holies. That's the one where the chief priest went one time a year. You know, that's the big curtain, thick curtain is in there. There it is right there. That basically is the temple. Okay, court of men over here, court of men over here, women down here. Now, the reason I do all that is to help us understand, I think, let me say this, it helped me understand, so if I figure out that it helped me, it'd help y'all too. So that's the purpose of it, because we have a scene that takes place right here. And it helped me when I need a picture, folks, but I'm a little slow, and so I need pictures to do these kind of things. So, all right, I want you to look at the first chapter of the book of Luke. Open your Bible right there. I'm going to do a quick summary of verses 8 through 12, because our focal passage does not see what else. Now, I want to ask you a question. Thinking, knowing what we know, priest is in here by himself. Okay, he goes in, he puts the incense right here, make sure that it's wafting its way upward. Then he stops and he prays. He kneels and prays right here for that kind of thing before he comes back out and the people are out here. That in mind, helps us understand that. Now, here is Zechariah right here doing this. And all of a sudden, he has an angel standing beside him. My question, why, of all people, why might a priest be afraid of an angel? Just something to think about, isn't it? Of all people, why might a priest, that's what he did. Why was he afraid of an angel like Zechariah was? Now, I want to ask you another one. Would it be safe to say that today Zechariah was expecting an angel about as much as I'm expecting one? You got it? And I want you to stop and think about that for just a moment. What do? We walk around living our lives day by day, with the expectation that we know what God's going to do, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We don't get into God's plan. But that's the kind of setting that we're dealing with right here. I imagine that if an angel were in a parish, I want you to think what you'd do. No, I don't know. You don't know what you do. I don't know what I do either. But a couple things. Think my pulse wouldn't kick up? If my doctor was there, he'd get concerned about me and blood pressure in a big, big way, that kind of thing. What about the hair on the back of your neck? Would it traditional standing up, as that would be? You think you'd have goosebumps all over your body? All this just because an angel walked in and stood beside you. That's what Zechariah, that's where he was in this regard. So, I think you have to say that Zechariah was scared more than he was happy. Now, that's why we're going to look at this right here. Now, are we any different today, folks, as a church? If God's Spirit moves in a very special way, do we go, I need to look around, I need to be careful, or I need to observe, whatever it might be. But he was doing his business, routine, and all of a sudden God intervened in his situation right here. If that were to happen, I think today, if God's Spirit, I wondered. Now, folks, whatever you do, don't nod your head. Because if you do, I have to talk to Belva about it. Okay? But are we any different than Zechariah? And by that, I'm talking about if God came in and moved in our midst in a worship service right down there, what would we do? How would we react? Now, I try to get into that skin for just a minute. Okay, you go outside after it's all over, and you tell somebody, you know what we start that like with? You would not believe what happened in our church today. Folks, this is not far off as we think it is it? What happened right here with Zechariah. Now, one more for you to think about. Next Sunday, if Darren announced that the next Sunday, okay, which will be in the 20th of December. If Darren announced next Sunday that on the 20th of December, that everybody that comes here to church would individually hear God speak. Darren's going to promise that, and he says, I know it's going to happen, and God told me it's going to do that kind of thing. How many people would find somewhere else to go on Sunday morning? Stop and think about it just a moment. Man, I'm not sure I want to get involved in something like that. Okay, now, all of that, here's Zechariah. He's a priest. Okay? And look where he is. He's in there doing his thing because he's going to go out in just a moment like that. So I want you to look at what Gabriel says to Zechariah as Gabriel talks about what God is going to do. Look at verse 13. And I'm going to do reading today for purposes. I'll read out of the New American Standard. Look at verse 13. But the angel said to Zechariah, do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your petition has been heard. I didn't just make one. What was he doing? He was in there tending to business, wasn't it, as a priest. But what is his petition over the years? This is what the angel is talking about. It says, your petition has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will give him the name John. We have evidence right here that Zacharias and Elizabeth had obviously prayed for years that God would give them a son. Now, folks, sons were... don't misread, don't misinterpret. Sons at that point in time were highly revered. Okay, you needed sons for your family to go on the name and all of that kind of thing. That's the point that's being made right here. So, you've prayed that would happen, and here you are. Well, I don't know how old Zechariah was, but he's old enough that he decided it wasn't going to ever happen. But here, at a point in time, way after I think Zacharias had given up, God comes to him and says, I'm going to answer your prayer. Think about that, if your name is Zechariah in that regard. Then another thing, you're going to name him John. Just a minute. Let me tell you what culturally, at that point in time, what they did in Israel. They named him after the boy's father's family, or name. Oftentimes it's the father's name is put on a son. But here it is, John doesn't even fit in the name Zacharias or anything about it. But Gabriel tells him that very kind of thing. So look in verse 15 now. For he will be, this son of yours, will be great in the sight of the Lord, and he will drink no wine or liquor. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit, and yet that will take place all while he is in his mother's womb. Now, if you look at the first part of verse 15, God is telling Zechariah, there's going to be a great revival, and your son's going to be the leader of it. He's going to be leading forth in that very kind of thing. Now, you don't even have one or anything about it, but here's the angel telling him all that very kind of thing. I want you to look, what does he say? Look at verses 15 and 16 actually. What does the angel say about the son? What do you see there? What's the first one? There, you walk him down. What's he says? He's going to what? Okay, you know, my Bible says he's going to be great inside the Lord. Okay, whatever that means, however you interpret it, that's fine. But this is how he said, let me tell you about this child that y'all are going to have. Look at the second one. What's that? You'll not drink any wine or liquor. That's that one. All right. What's the next one? What?
Filled with the Holy Spirit.
All right. Okay, got to ask you a question. Where was he? Still in his mother's womb. Now, you want to talk about something special, folks. This is a classic example. God being, you think, hey, nobody God do something like this. Okay, now there's one more thing. What's it? Verse 16. Turn many of the children of Israel, what? They'll turn back to the Lord. Now, folks, we're talking about Gabriel, excuse me. If I say Gabriel, if I say God, I probably mean Gabriel. Okay, y'all just make the click change in your head. All right, Gabriel is saying to him, okay, that there's going to be one big revival break out, and he's going to be leading that thing. That's my plan for his life. Okay, verse 17, take a look at it. The first phrase of verse 17, look what it says. It says that he will go, your son will go as a forerunner before the Lord, and he'll do it in what way? What? Okay, stop for just a moment. What do these people here in the New Testament know about the great prophet Elijah way back in the Old Testament? What do they know about? What kind of guy? Y'all tell me what Elijah was like. What comes to mind when you think about Elijah in the Old Testament?
Oh. The thing with Baal, praying and the fire came. Do you remember the Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal? What was the deal? 1 against 400? You remember that? What happened? Okay, look at what they're doing right here. And this thing right here, what he is saying, he says, he will go in the power. Your son is going to go in the power of Elijah. Somebody that was a great revered ancestor of theirs back in the Old Testament. You're going to have it again. That's what Gabriel is telling Zacharias right here. Got a question. We're going to hang on to that because I'm going to come to it right now on this question. Does God have a primary purpose? He talked about a primary purpose for John, did he not? Called him the John the Baptist. But he had a primary purpose, and what is it? It's to go before the Messiah and make the way for him. Does God have a primary purpose for every believer? Okay? Chew on that one on the way home, will you? If I've dealt with it all week, then you ought to have to deal with it. Okay? Now, interesting thing about Zacharias again. His lifestyle was what? What did he do? He worked at the temple. After all, he's a priest.